and welcome to today's live chat. It's been a while since I did. Hello, good evening, Colin. And it's been a while since anything related to Ukraine, but I thought, in view of the what happened 2 days ago, that this was a subject worth discussing. And I should have done it last night, but last night I was sorry, I've got the computer on so I can see when people what they actually write to me. I should have done it last night, but I was too tired last night, so it didn't actually get done. So the Kremlin was attacked, apparently, by something that rather reminded me of a firework. And apparently that this is, according to Russian media, which all more or less got onto it at the same time, surprise, surprise, an attack on the life of Putin. It was an assassination attempt. Well, to be quite honest, and it would be more like an assassination attempt if I let the dog off the lead. I think there's about as much chance of getting Putin as this clearly very lightly armed drone. And the thing is, of course, who actually did it? Now, it's just, well, I didn't do it last night because today the Russians, the Kremlin, let's call it, so I don't want to blame Russia. I think it's wrong to say Russians when we're talking about Putin and his regime. So the Kremlin blamed the United States. So somehow, I don't know if this means that this was sort of launched from somewhere in the United States and they're sent over there. You would expect the United States to send something a bit better than that. But anyway, that's what they say. So I think we can sort of get rid of that idea. Of course, they could say it was the United States sending a drone over from Ukraine. Now, the distance from Ukraine to the Kremlin, its closest point, is roughly 500 kilometers. The drone would probably fly in a straight line, and so when it got there, it would. I suppose that is possible. I mean, Saratov has been hit, for example, and nobody is saying that was anything other than a Ukrainian attack. I mean, this is the aircraft where the cruise missiles are launched from Saratov, or some of them anyway. And so that was a perfectly logical attack. Now, Colin just written, said 2 men were seen in the vicinity of the pyrotechnics shortly before the display. Well, that could well be the case. I haven't actually, just before doing this, I went out, so I don't know what's happened in the last hour or so. So I find it very difficult to believe that this was done for Ukraine. But there is something else that is worth considering, is this: there have been a number of instances, for example, in the Bryansk Oblast, there were 2 train derailments which may have been caused by Ukrainian special forces, and it isn't beyond imagination to think that Ukrainian special forces would have infiltrated Russia and are likely to be carrying out attacks of this nature, or carrying out attacks. The thing is like this: derailing a train, blowing up a fuel depot, or something like that makes sense. A fireworks attack on the Kremlin is utterly ridiculous, and it doesn't make much sense. There is, however, yet 2 more options, which I'm coming to before I'll get to the one which is utterly obvious who probably did it. And the next one is that it could have been Russians. It could have been patriotic Russians. It could have been the anti-Nazi resistance, or it could have been the really even nastier Nazis that Putin surrounded himself by. So if it were a resistance group that did it, the thing is this: what would be the point? When you have acts of this nature, when you have people who are rebelling, they will normally say, that was us, and they would do something to make the point. Now, having a fireworks display at the top of the Kremlin doesn't make much sense to me. Not only that, if it was a resistance group, this just seems like a way of absolutely ensuring that they would get caught. It's a bit like Sophie Scholl with the leaflets in Munich University in 1943, throwing it was almost bound to get caught no matter what happened. So I find that really, really hard to believe as well. Now, could it have been the opposition to Putin? The horrible thing is that at the moment, if there's any opposition to Putin, it's coming not from people like Navalny and others, the incredibly heroic, brave people who are resisting this regime has already tried to murder them. But on the other hand, it's coming from these hardcore anti just about everything, hate-filled neo-Nazi ultra-nationalists. That is where these people like Prigozhin and others, they could have been to make the point that they can get rid of Putin. I mean, things like this have happened in the past, where a regime has been overthrown by one which was even more extreme. One thing that came to my mind actually this afternoon was this. I thought in 1934 Hitler did a false flag really, that it was going to be a putsch by Ernst Röhm and the SA, and the reason he came up with this putsch idea was because the conservatives in the government, the president Hindenburg, was really angry at Hitler for not keeping the SA under control, and Blomberg, who was head of the army, was a bit offhand with him as well. The very same Blomberg who was to bring in the Hitler Oath not so long later. But anyway, that apart. And so Hitler turned on the SA. And so it was seemed as though the SA were the extremists and Hitler and his lot were the moderates. They have moderation in them in extreme. I don't believe it was either of them though. And to say Collins suggests it was a false flag, and Christopher suggesting it was a failed fireworks display. Yes, I think it was that, and I'm now going to give you the reason for it as well. The thing is this, it was utterly childish. Who is it aimed at? I mean, it wasn't aimed to convince the likes of people watching this video, or me, or people who can have some intelligence, who can see through it. This is meant for, first of all, the brain dead neo-Nazis, the communists, those who support Putin, is to making them believe it's for their benefit. And so it could be said that one of the byproducts could be to make the United States say to Ukraine, hey, you've got to stop it, because the United States has shown that it's prepared to give Ukraine weapons to defend itself if it's to protect life, but not to such an extent that it can try and finish the war. So that's one. But I believe that this is for consumption by the people, Russian people. And I think what the aim is the following. We're coming up to Victory Day. I did a video on Victory Day last year. And then they get all these people out, not only as the military displays and all the rest of it, but also people go onto the street and they have pictures of their relatives who died in the war. So now nearly all of us have relatives who died in the war. I mean, I was just thinking today actually of my own relatives who died in the Second World War. Of course, I wasn't born then, but whose pictures I could carry. For example, I had two my relatives killed in the RAF, one in the crash landing in the UK, and one over France. I had another relative who was killed on turned out D-Day. I was told 7th of June, but when I'd investigated, it was turned out to be the 6th of June, I had relatives who were killed here in Poland. So I had, I could be carrying all of these pictures if I could put my hands on them. And people in Russia, I mean, it'd be very, very hard to find somebody who didn't have somebody's picture to carry. Now, what if people turn up and they are carrying pictures of their relatives who have been killed in Ukraine, and they're then making a massive protest of this nature? Now, we don't know how many Russians have been killed. I do find the suggestions that it's a six-figure sum to be totally exaggerated, but I do believe it's in six figures as far as casualties are concerned. So if we've got this type of deaths, then imagine the situation. Imagine if it's even only 20,000. If 20,000 people, but they've got families, so let's say families of 5 and turn up, 100,000 people protesting. That is not what the Kremlin wants. In previous years, in 2018, for example, in Kazan, people turned up and they were given pictures to carry, so that they would seem to have somebody to be actually to. But then again, I mean, let's face it, not all of us have. I mentioned my relatives. I mean, I find it rather difficult to put my hands on their pictures to go out and carry them were we to do something here in a few days' time. So therefore, what I believe is what they're trying to do is to make it seem as though it's the Ukrainians or the Americans. Doesn't make any difference who it is, really. It is to show people we are under attack. The fact of the matter is that despite these non-stop terrorist attacks on Ukraine, the Ukrainians have done next to nothing to hit targets in Russia. Next to nothing. And okay, there has been artillery hitting the border to the north of Kharkiv, to the south of Belgorod. But other than that, it's nothing. One of the things that the Kremlin propaganda constantly harps on about is the bombardments in the Donbass. Utter nonsense. The bombardments were it were counter bombardment, but they wasn't. The Ukrainian side wasn't bombarding its own cities, as the Kremlin propaganda constantly says. So therefore, this makes perfect sense that this is a false flag operation, and it's just totally absurd. Next thing I'd have to say also is the utter cowardice of Putin. It's clear that Putin doesn't sleep in the Kremlin. He is utterly terrified, and nobody knows where he sleeps, or some probably knows, but he's probably deep in some bunker somewhere in the middle of nowhere. And the idea that a tiny firework, which didn't even appear to set fire to the flag, never mind anything else, you think that the flagpole might have been a bit knocked out of position or something, but it didn't even do that. So now, for those of you who know Moscow, in Red Square, it's actually, when you see pictures of it, it looks much bigger than it really is. In fact, I think I've got in my on the history site and on Facebook, it's me in Moscow in Red Square. I've got a picture of, and I tried to when I had my camera, I was trying to make it seem bigger than it really is, because it's not as big, because you see all this stuff going through it, but usually the camera angles are such that it seems like enormous. It isn't enormous. I mean, it's big as far as squares are concerned, but for example, I was in the square in Kharkiv not long ago, and I've got a video of that, and that really is big, but in Moscow it isn't that big. And so any attack on that, and that particularly given the architecture of it, that could be quite dangerous. No, there isn't also if there were a mass crowd panic or something, the exits from it could maybe towards the Moscow River, there where St. Basil's is. Yeah, it's a bit more open there, but the other way it's quite blocked off. And on one side you've got the GUM supermarket type. No, supermarket's not the right word. It's like luxury shopping area, and on the other way you've got the Kremlin. So So I think it's to stop that. Now I do appreciate that most of the deaths have not occurred from people that come from ethnic minorities, but if you went out to the east to somewhere like Khabarovsk or whatever, or the places where the people who have been fighting in Ukraine are, that could there must be situations in towns there where everybody knows somebody who has not come back. And so that's the reason, I think. Good. Right. So anyway, as far as I'm concerned, it's a fireworks display, and yes, and as Colin writes, it's an early fireworks display to celebrate the coronation. Putin did send his condolences and best wishes to Charles on the death of Her Majesty. Well, that was very nice of Putin to do such a thing. I really ought to do something on the coronation myself, and to say what I think of it, which may be of interest to non-British viewers. Tomorrow I've got a video on Hermann Goering's yacht, which was a couple of years in the making, but I did it eventually, and so there'll be that. That's not on a live chat, but it will be on a premiere, and I will be around for that. Thanks very much for watching, and for the moment, all the best from me in Wrocław, Poland. Bye for now.